So this is it, the last of the Mohicans.
This is it. All right.
And we got Paul Hallen to helicopter in literally in the last hour, I think. When did you land? An hour ago?
I got here about 10 minutes ago.
There you go. Helicoptered in, just like I said. We have four of the big strategics here. These are the big boys. They make all the big decisions. We're going to try to get them to tell us what's cooking, what's going to be next. We're going to try not to predict the demise of ophthalmology. I could sense Praveen's blood pressure and Cedric somewhere out in the country during that GA conversation. I could feel the blood pressure rising in all the GA people. So, and Bill Freeman's my friend, but he stuck it to them a little bit. These guys are kindler, gentler. I'm going to just give you their names. They're all part of brand name companies. They're executives. They've been making big decisions for a long time. Paul Hallen, Gianluca Rossetti, Anthony Wallace, and Andrew Stewart. Welcome, guys. If you could take a minute to introduce yourselves, your company, and what you do at that company.
Yeah, so Paul Hallen, Global Head of Retina for Alcon. I worked at Alcon now for about 34 years, and despite your introduction, I'm not that nice, especially on panels, so sorry.
Well, Paul is a straight shooter on panels. By the way, that's the other thing. These guys were hand-selected by me and others, Craig too, because they're truth tellers, they're transparent. It's always tough to do the strategic panel because whether public or private, these are big companies. They got to hold things a little close to the vest, but these guys are hand-selected. They're going to be truth tellers. Paul is a truth teller, I know. That's what he's saying. Please, Anthony.
Well, for us, I'll start off by saying, first of all, thank you to Craig and Maureen for having us. This is a great venue. Great to be back together. And thank you. I was sharing with you earlier, my morning commute on Wednesdays, listening to the podcast is always very helpful to kill that hour-and-a-half commute in New Jersey traffic.
Other people use it to fall asleep, but thank you for that.
He's already sucking up to the moderator.
No, I love it. Well, you know what? Transparency's good. Good job, Anthony. I'm throwing you a few softballs.
I'm serious.
Anthony gets a softball.
It beats talk radio or more about politics on the radio, so it's been great. But thank you. So Anthony Wallace with Bausch & Lomb. I lead the surgical business. Not that long with Bausch & Lomb. I joined earlier this year, and previously I was with Novartis leading their ophthalmology business.
Thank you, Faraz, for the invitation. I came from a long trip, so no commute, no traffic, but a long flight, and apologize for my strong Italian accent. Dunpe Farmaceutici, I lead the corporate and business development and strategic planning. Joined the company in 2020, really trying to make an impact and reinforce our presence in ophthalmology. I like to say that we are here to stay in the field. And Dunpe has been founded, as Giorgio Pasetti said this morning, 135 years ago. So a long history. We traditionally had business in primary care in Italy, mainly in Europe. We invested our profits for many, many years in innovative projects. And in 2018, we launched Oxalate in the US. It was a great success for us, for the patient, for ophthalmology in general, I believe. And so, I mean, the idea is to try to replicate the success, and so thank you for the invitation.
Andrew.
So, Faraz, I think you owe Praveen probably the first drink. Following Praveen on this panel, it made our job that much easier. We have a chock full of opportunities, things to unpack after that panel that we heard a few moments ago. So
the world of ophthalmology is going to die or live on Praveen.
On Praveen Dougal.
And
so all of us
too,
are in or out of a job based on the success of what Cedric and Praveen do in the next 6 months. I think that's a lot of pressure for those guys for sure. So, Andrew Stewart, I run our Retina business at Allergan and AbbVie Company. Thrilled to be with all of you today. And Faraz, thanks for asking me to be on the panel today with this great group of people.
Thank you for coming. So let's get started. The first topic I wanted to talk about is one we've talked about a long time in investing, also with the strategic guys. It's always been said, I don't know if it's true or not true, we're going to hear from you guys, that device companies aren't so good at bringing along, recognizing, developing, commercializing drugs, and more importantly, maybe vice versa, drug companies are not particularly good at bringing along, developing, and commercializing devices. Paul, I'm going to start with you. You have some personal experience in this recently. You just came out from under a big pharma as a device company. You won your freedom. You had the War of Independence, and you're back out on the street. So
I'm trying to put words in my mouth.
No, that's my word.
This is recorded, right?
It is.
Okay.
And it's videoed.
It's video. Okay, great.
You handsome.
So
that changes everything.
So you were kind of implying that we're a device company, which is not untrue. We're really good in surgical, but the fact of the matter is we started as a pharma company 75 years ago in Fort Worth at a drive-up pharmacy. Mr. Alexander, the Al, and Mr. Connor, they started that, invented the drop tainer. We were number one in pharma for many, many years. As you know, glaucoma, allergy, dominant, anti-infective, anti-inflammatory, even in the ear. If anybody has kids that are swimming, they probably have had Ciprodex. So we're a pharma company, and actually we've never stopped. Novartis, when we divorced, when they left, they took a lot of the good drugs, but we still had some drugs and infrastructure, and as you've probably heard, we're getting back more deeply into pharma. So
your position would be
so
there's
absolutely,
no
you
reason
can
for
do
that
you can do
separation.
pharma
Yeah.
if you're a device company. The question is, can you do pharma, the other way around?
Okay. Gianluca, what do you think? Dompe has been mostly pharma. Maybe you can enlighten us if there's other things, but what's your take on this? Do you feel that both sides can be done by the same company well?
Yeah, I believe a company like Dompe, our size being like a small to medium size, we should really focus and leverage on our capabilities. And especially we've been working mainly as a drug discovery and drug development company, so I believe we should stick with that. But we're looking at the indication that still have a high level unmet need, and if devices will be the best solution for patients, we're very happy to take that, or in the indication we currently cover, if there is some synergistic devices. But in that case, I feel that we should consider to acquire the capabilities, because we don't have in-house enough expertise in the field.
I'm glad you used the word synergy, because I'm going to extend the question a little bit and invite the other two to comment further. So there are synergies between diagnostics, certainly, forgetting surgical device for a minute, but diagnostics and drugs. And I want to ask you two fine fellas about how that would look in your companies. And I want to just kind of remember that 15 to 20 years ago, most people in here know about this, anti-VEGF drugs and OCT grew up together. In the very early 2000s, a lot of us clinicians weren't sure what we were going to use OCT for. Okay, it's a macular hole, I can see it, I can fix it, but I could see it without the OCT. Well, we were dead wrong. It turned out OCT became an absolutely critical leg in the treatment of all these diseases that we now treat. And at the same time, it made choosing to inject a drug or not inject a drug a very binary choice. You walk in the room, you look at the scan, I do this every day. He's wet, I'm going to inject him today. So I guess, Anthony, you could start, or Andrew, doesn't matter. Do you see, for a pharma company with great drug assets, a reason to maybe go out and look for or develop diagnostics that would be synergistic with your own product, help promote it, help it to be used by the physicians?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a need and there's synergies. And I think there's also a responsibility, right, in some ways, in patient selection and really trying to figure out responders. And we obviously have to have benchmarks. We have to have biomarkers for phase 3 trials. You have to have them for FDA filings. You have to have them for a lot of insurance reimbursement, right? There has to be, they have to be at a certain level to reimburse the drug. So I think there's definitely motivation to do that. I think there's a responsibility too. I mean, if you truly want to get your drug to the right patient and you want to ensure access, then you have to find a pathway to help get there. And again, I'm talking mostly around asymptomatic disorders or even symptomatic disorders that take longer to progress, right? That you just need some biomarkers to see that. So then the theory of companion diagnostics, right, which is something a little bit different than like OCT and stuff, but a companion diagnostic, which has been mostly used in oncology, as some of these future precision medicines and personalized medicines come to fruition, these are expensive, costly medicines. They bring a lot of value, but it's got to go to the right patient. You can't give it to the population, expect insurance companies to reimburse it, and then find out that it worked in this 10%. So you have to really help diagnose the right patient. You have to help get your drug reimbursed, right? And you have to help with patient selection for your HCP partners. And I think that's the responsibility that should be on the table. Now, it's not as easy as we think, right? there's different filing pathways to get these things approved, right? It's not your typical, trials with FDA and submissions. There's 510Ks, and you need a different kind of regulatory mindset to do that, and a development team. But I think there's a lot of value in it. I think it's worthwhile, and I really think we have a responsibility to do it.
Andrew?
Look, the truth is, I think it depends, right? And I think you have to ask yourself two strategic questions to help answer the question. The first is, does it support the commercial success of the asset that we're talking about, number one? And number two, when we think about the synergistic integration of that asset as a diagnostic, is that aligned with our core capabilities, right? And so let's take the example that you mentioned from an OCT perspective, just to use a general and broad example that's relevant for everyone just about in the room. Does it make sense for Regeneron or Genentech to own a home OCT type of asset? It doesn't, right? You're gonna have a chronic injection, frequent visits, constant visits back to you, Faraz, within your office in order to make sure that you're maintaining therapy. Earlier today, we heard about all kinds of different innovations of longer acting TKIs and different innovative platforms that will come in the space and promise for much longer duration of those patients in their treatment. Faraz, do you want that patient to go 6 months without seeing you?
No, but I do think that there's now, I don't want to change the course of where you're going. I totally agree with that premise. And you're right, with the OCT home monitoring question, I totally agree with you. But we're hearing, and we heard some cynicism about it today, and we heard it at Retina Society as well. Some people may have been there for that. How we're going to administer to whom are we going to administer dry AMD drugs? And it sounds like we're going to have to start thinking of some innovative ways to select those patients. Who are the right patients? Who are going to be the winners on the clinical side? And it seems to me that maybe the companies that are going to be so smart at developing the drug might also be the ones smart enough to figure out how do we as clinicians administer the drug with what functional diagnostic, if that's what we need. I don't know if that's how it's going to play out. Yep. You're doing both. So you look at both.
Right.
Is this part of the process? This will support one of our products or not really?
In the interest of being nice for once, I'll say Gianluca is correct in that you better acquire that technology, because there's a reason why Genentech and Regeneron did not buy OCT. They were smart enough to focus on what they're good at. And that area in particular was one where OCT was many companies already, and it takes a lot to keep up and have the best OCT at the right price. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. I might recommend, as he did, buying a company. And I think that, there's enough innovative people out there. We're in a strange situation in that we do both. So it's really interesting for us to think about the therapy first and then developing a diagnostic around that. And, just being aware of a lot of these technologies, I think that's something that could happen with us.
Let's switch topics. Let's move. I wanted to talk about public versus private companies, and we have both on this panel. And you could be pretty big, public or private, and we have that. I'll start with you, Anthony, because you have a pretty specific experience with your company. They were public, then they were taken private, and now they recently became public again. I'm not sure when you joined, but I know you're familiar with that long history. What are the advantages versus disadvantages? And I'm specifically referring to advantages or disadvantages with regard to mergers and acquisitions, investment into startups, things that people in this room are interested in. What is advantageous to being public versus private in your opinion?
Yeah, so I have, I've mostly been with public companies, and then, B&L is in a unique position that it was on its own, Bausch & Lomb, and then, went under the Valiant umbrella as Bausch Health, and then now spun off again as Bausch & Lomb. And I can tell you, in joining right around that time frame, the benefits of being a pure play eye care company, for one, I think are pretty incredible. Everyone speaks the same language, you have the same mission, you're very focused on what you do. You're not, trading resources between a cardiovascular trial and a GI trial, and I can't get my trial done because the money's going there. So I really like the pure play eye care. I think it's something I haven't been part of before, and I've really seen a difference here. On the public versus private, the private, obviously, there are some things there's some benefits, but there's also some things that slow you down, right? One thing that immediately comes to mind is the painful 2 weeks every quarter when you have to prepare all of your statements for earnings and you have to go through your board and everything, and everything else goes along with that. But there's also some benefit too, right? You have a lot of good thought. You have a lot of non-industry and also non-company thought that come into it. You have a lot of stakeholders that come into it. And you do move a little bit slower sometimes than, in the private space. The private space, I mean, you can move pretty rapidly and, your decision tree is a lot less. But when you're focused, I think the bigger thing is that I've seen with B&L is when you're focused in that pure play eye care space or whatever you're doing, when you're focused in there, you can be really successful when you're not dealing with the barriers that you deal with the broader company in different franchises and different businesses.
Right, so the unique attribute there is that you're focused singularly in ophthalmology. Gianluca, you're with a private company. You'll describe the mechanism of that. Do you see an advantage there in being faster, speedier, more efficient in your mergers and acquisitions?
Yeah, I feel that being one step away from the single shareholder we have, it's surely make things easier.
Single shareholder for the whole company?
Yes, we have a single shareholder, so it's quite a unique situation, I believe. But I feel that like everything in life, there are pros and cons. I mean, when we get to see and evaluate M&A deals, especially if they are sizable, I mean, all the money are from a single shareholder and not a multiple group of investors. So sometimes it's tough to write big checks, and also especially if you take a European and Italian entrepreneur, there is a bit of they're a bit against the debt, so we tend to afford acquisition with cash in our hands and not rely on debts. So it's when we get to M&A, it can be like a downside in my view. But and also that not having a public disclosure of our P&L, sometimes it goes under the radar, so it's tough to understand our size, what we do, and so on and so forth. The other way around, I think that makes things easier in the decision making. We have, as I said, 135 years of history, so we have a long-term vision. All the decisions we take are long-term. We're not worried about a quarter. It doesn't go as planned, the stock fluctuations and many other dynamics of the public market. And I feel also the management takes decisions that are more long-term, and so pros and cons.
So for you, if you have an idea about a merger or acquisition or investment, you literally go down the hall, knock on the door of the principal shareholder and pitch him.
Well,
or her.
Yeah, it's we have ideas, we sit and we brainstorm, but it's pretty straightforward, the decision making. So, yeah.
That's cool.
Good
Andrew, you're with a huge company now. Andrew was with Allergan, now part of AbbVie, gigantic. How has that changed things in this regard for you? You've been looking at startups and companies and investments in the eye space for a long time, both at Allergan and now under the bigger umbrella. Has that changed things for you?
Well, look, I certainly say it's very different from having a single shareholder, so that is definitely a different experience at AbbVie than it is certainly at Dompe, right? What I would say is it really is a function of the culture, and the culture at AbbVie to date has been extremely vested and interested and leaning into eye care. Overnight, we went from a company with an R&D spend of about $2.5 billion to a company with over $7 billion in R&D spend, annualized in 2022. The company has done 4 deals in the last 24 months, 2 of which have been in eye care. So certainly AbbVie culturally has very much leaned into the history and legacy of Allergan as an eye care company. They're very supportive of continuing to invest in this space, both from internal R&D programs as well as external collaborations, and I expect that to continue. So in this particular case so far for us, certainly I would say that being part of a larger company with a greater amount of scale allows AbbVie to remain as one of these large strategics as we see, not a lot of large mega strategics within this space, has allowed us to do that so far and do it successfully.
So there's been advantage,
Yep.
bigger pool of people and capital, and
For sure.
And you've been able to access that. You've said 2 out of the 4 deals were in ophthalmology.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, you're kind of in the reverse situation, having been under Novartis's huge umbrella, now back to Alcon. Not that Alcon's a small company, it's a big company, but has that changed how you approach deals or startups that you're investigating?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting. When I started, we actually were owned by Nestle.
Yes.
So they were very hands-off. We were very small at the time, maybe $1 billion. So they helped us grow. So I think having those deep pockets helped. Then, Novartis eventually acquired us, and they were more deep pockets again, but more heavy-handed. Didn't work out so well. And so here we are on our own. And I think everybody really likes where we're at now. And I think, the BD&L is really humming. Just the execution, the energy around Alcon is just as high as ever. And we are coming back into pharma and very strong in surgical. And we also do diagnostics that people maybe are unaware of.
As a surgeon, I can tell you, I agree, and there's almost been a different energy around people in the surgical Alcon divisions who, as you know, we've worked with closely at our group for many years. There has been a different energy. There's a bigger spring in your step, and maybe that's part of it. Last topic, I'm going to stay on time, although I've been way ahead of time, but other people ate up most of our time, and I think we got to finish.
This is the end, though, right?
This is, well, we're the only thing that stands between these fine people and a drink, a vodka tonic, or maybe they're the last thing that's between us.
I think they look pretty strong in general.
So I don't know who's blocking who right now. So this is for all of you. We can go in any order. You can start here or start with Andrew. We heard a little bit about some of the long-term view in ophthalmology. We heard the 50-50, we could go and collapse, or it can go really great. And, maybe I don't want to over dramatize those comments. They were great. And I was mesmerized by some of that discussion. You guys are in a position to control a lot of that to some extent. Where do you see ophthalmology in the next 3, 5, and 10 years? A lot happening in our space, regenerative medicine, there's surgical advances in robotics, and AI is playing a big role, and we have gene therapies and MIGS devices, and a whole lot has been happening in the last 5 to 10 years. It's exploded. Is that going to continue that way? And what are your companies looking for in the next 3, 5, and 10 year, specifically or generally? Andrew, maybe.
Sure, yeah, happy to start. So, look, I think if you take Jonathan and Cameron's points that they made in a couple of different unequal parts. First, Jonathan mentioned the amount of venture investment and the amount of early stage investments is still very, very healthy. And there's still a lot of new innovations that will come to the marketplace, which I think is really exciting for not only myself at AbbVie, but for obviously my colleagues that are up here on the panel. I think when you look at some of the comments around how financing will be done, those are financial engineering instruments that will weigh themselves out over time with the global economy and how things change. Less so Chen's comments, which were a little gloomy, I think, in general, around whether or not eye care is going to hinge on one single particular set of asset classes or not. But I think what we look for at AbbVie in the next 3 to 5 years, we are focused on a very broad pharmaceutical approach in 3 different areas, in glaucoma, in ocular surface, and certainly retina. And we'll continue to be active in those spaces, both internally and externally. And I think the future for eye care is extremely bright for not only AbbVie, but for the general community here at OIS and throughout all of the different areas that we work in.
I feel a sigh of relief starting to happen. Gianluca, how about you? What do you think?
Thank you. I believe that the more I talk with the KOL, the more I realize that there are many indications still a high level unmet need. So at Dompera, we believe that we should really invest in those, try to bring meaningful innovation and scientific breakthrough discoveries to those patients. So we cover end-to-end the full value chain. We've been investing in silico artificial intelligence drug discovery platform. Really, we believe will fuel our innovation in the upcoming years, bringing innovative solution to the market. But also we try to pioneer, since I joined the company, a new model of collaborating with the rest of the company. So I see a couple of our partners here in a room. So really meaningful science accelerated by our artificial intelligence platform in a way that we accelerate their own pathway without harming their development, so we don't ask any strong licensing terms on the asset, anything just to allow themselves and accelerate third-party evolution and innovation. So we believe in ophthalmology, and again, we believe that innovative science can unlock many situations.
So despite some of the financial discussions earlier, you're still bullish on ophthalmology?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anthony?
Well, we're certainly bullish on ophthalmology.
Yeah.
We don't have a choice.
I hope so, yeah.
So if it
You've
doesn't
gotta go
work
there.
out, so a lot of pressure, Praveen. But we do, look, I do think, the next, let's call it 2 to 5 years in one segment is going to look, a certain way, right? I think you'll see some great advancement. I do think the GA therapies will be successful. I think, we'll be successful in surgical, right? You'll have better vit cutters. You're going to have better lenses. You're going to have incremental gains over the next, 2 to 5 years. I'll take a little bit different stance than on the year 5 to 10, right? And I think it's also exciting, but it's going to look different, right? It's really hard to ignore some of the macro trends right now. If you really unpack the Inflation Reduction Act and you think how that's going to change at least some of the reimbursement, right, and what goes on there, you look at the current trends of PBMs and payers, right? They spend $6 billion a year to put programs in place to limit drugs getting to patients, right? I hate to say it that way, but that's what it does, right? There's about $93 billion that's spent every year between drug companies and patients and you and your peers and the PBMs on really trying to get around that, right? And trying to get access to medicine. So it's becoming very difficult. 1 in 3 prescriptions are never filled, right? And then you look at, look at other things that play into this as well. CMS reimbursements are coming down, right, in procedures. They're not going up. And I think, the differentiation between really true novel innovation is getting harder and harder. Now, that's all. It's a great motivation for us to bring better things to market. You heard from Michael Chang. You heard from Avellino as well, and you heard some of this precision medicine, and we really think this is the way it's going to go. But it's not going to be possible without data, AI, and really understanding better patient trends. It could be with we talked about companion diagnostics, but it could also be with just collecting data, finding the right patient to put that lens in, to finding the right toric alignment, finding the right medicine that goes to that patient, and really being precise about how we treat certain disorders. And I think that's going to be, and some of it's gene therapy, some of it is just, identifying the right patient for other treatments. But I think it's going to be on us to really bring that innovation forward, and we're really going to have to be disruptive as you get beyond the next 5 years.
Thank you. I agree that if there's going to be a wet blanket, it's always the same thing. I think it's downward pressure on reimbursement to providers and hospitals and et cetera that may stunt certain innovation areas, but to your point, that may drive other types of innovation. Do you think, I want to follow on to your comment, do you think that when your great companies start finding these new, exciting, personalized medicine, do you think that the payers, the country at large, will be willing to pay for that kind of precision because there's going to be a lot of cost in developing that, and we may not have uniquely yet the reimbursement capacity measuring sticks for that kind of precision medicine?
It's what we've been talking about. It's evidence-based outcomes, right? You look at 3 drugs that are north of $1 million for one treatment, right?
Yeah.
So look at the, you have obviously you have Luxturna, which is right around $1 million. You have a drug for SMA that's $2.1 million, one dose, right? And then you have a drug that was just approved 2 weeks ago for hemophilia B that is a factor, I think it's factor 9, and that is $3.5 million for one course of therapy. So I can't speak to the third one, but I can speak to the other 2. They're fully reimbursed.
Yeah.
But there's precision that goes along with that. So I think the days of the primary care kind of let's give something to everyone are going to start to fade. The value is really going. None of us sit around a war room and say, I want to bring the 5th drop to market that does the same thing as the other 4. And I'm
The next hypertension medicine.
We just don't do that. It's really how do we disrupt the space? How do we fill an unmet need? And it's really tough to get there, but that's where true innovation is going to happen when we're challenged like that. But so far, payers have reimbursed that, and I'll tell you, it's hardly discounted. So the rebates and discounts going back on those precision type medicines are much smaller than the ones you fill on a Part D in a pharmacy or or a Part B where you buy and bill and inject in the office.
I totally agree. Paul, you've always been a good prognosticator, and I don't just mean football, and you're pretty good at basketball prognostication. But I'll give you the last word. 3, 5, 10 years, what will we be doing? What are you looking for?
I'm going to kind of answer it the way I want, like I usually do. So first, on surgically, I think the real issue there, we've really advanced the technologies, modernized retina surgery, cataract surgery, lenses. I think there's a lot of people out there not seeing due to access. So we should probably talk more about that. Perfectly capable of having people see, and we just can't get it to them. And yet we're spending $1 billion on a dose for one person. So that, just want to get that off my chest, number one.
It's an excellent point.
Number two, prognostication. So the first one is we really need a sustained delivery glaucoma drug. There are a lot of, drugs out there that have hyperemia issues going transcorneally. And we need something that's, 6 months, 12 months for glaucoma to solve that problem. This problem's been around a long time. I don't know why we haven't solved that one yet. I know there's people trying, but so I think that's going to happen in the next 5 or 6 years. And I say this not saying Alcon's working on it or anything like that. This is just what I would like to see. And the second one is really it's dry AMD.
Yeah.
And I think that we need a.
Are we
really,
just at the beginning now?
I didn't hear this other controversial talk.
No, it wasn't controversial.
But I do want to say
It made us all sad.
We really need early detection far from the retinal office with the intelligence that AI brings now. So the timing's really good, right? And then I think beyond that, the two drugs that are out there, they're amazing. And we all need to think back to Macugen. I'm not comparing them to Macugen, but you've got to start with something that improves and build on that. And I think that we'll probably see something from one of these companies or other companies that advance that very large unmet need. It's number one. So I don't know what was said before, but we need to fix that one.
I totally agree. I'm going to make that the last word because that was pretty definitive. As always, Paul always closes down the show. Thank you, all four of you. Fantastic. You guys always bring a lot of interesting comments, and we know that these are the conversations that you're having in the war room, so thank you for letting us in for a minute. That's going to be the end of it. So time for a vodka tonic.